This meeting to order. Would you stand and say the pledge with me, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Councilor Bowie is not with us tonight, so I'll be the chairman this evening. I'd like to have the roll call. Councilor Bowie is excused. Councilor Cody?
Present.
Councilor Crafts?
Here.
Councilor LaRochelle?
Here.
Councilor Lunt?
Here.
Councilor Mason's here. Councilor Pomelo?
Here.
Okay. Next, Twyla?
There are no public hearings. We'll begin with the consent agenda. Order 2010-99 to approve the minutes of May 11, May 18, and a vitulers license for Mark LaRoche doing business as Mark's Deli.
Okay, I'll make a motion that,
Actually, I'll make a motion that
Okay.
actually accept the consent agenda as listed by Twyla.
I'll second that. Laurie
sorry.
seconded it.
all those in favor? Okay.
Those opposed?
There's
6-0?
none. 6-0.
All right. Council orders, resolutions, and ordinances. Order 2010-100, nominations to MMA's Legislative Policy Committee.
Michelle Trammell was nominated to serve on this committee, and we did contact her, and I don't know if she got back to Jody, if she would like to serve after we sent you the material. How about? Excuse me? Yeah, tonight's the last night we have to make that decision. Yep, please.
Way out there.
Although I appreciate the nomination, I read through all the materials, and from what I've read, it's, they're taking 3 people from our county, not just particularly based on the nomination, that it is that a nomination. But it also requires 10 hours every single month of commitment, and that's not something that I'm capable of doing right now based on my work hours, so, I mean, I appreciate it, but that's an awful lot of time consistently throughout the entire year, so.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate you looking at it, though, at least considering it.
Yes. Is there anybody that has any other nominations?
I would volunteer if nobody
Okay.
else is going to serve from here.
Steve will volunteer. Do we have to take vote on that?
Yes, you do.
Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion that we send Steve as a volunteer.
Nominate.
Nomination, I know, I'm kidding, sorry. To MMA's Legislative Policy Committee.
I make a motion that we accept his nomination for the position.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 6-0.
As for losing Dale, I think it's important that we stay on top of what's going on, even though I know Dale will keep us informed.
Right.
Go ahead,
Time
Twyla.
under other business, ALD 1121, an act to protect elderly residents from losing their homes due to taxes or foreclosure.
This is some legislation that passed in this last session. It actually was placed into law on November 20th, and I wasn't aware that it was, but one of the citizens, an elderly citizen, brought it to my attention. And Dale and I have talked about this. It goes into effect on July 12th, I think is the date. And in order for us to do something with this, I think I provided all the materials on what it entails, we would have to put together an ordinance in order to accomplish that. I think it's a worthwhile, my opinion, it's a worthwhile endeavor, because all communities have elderly that are struggling as it is, and I think it would be a good thing to look at. That's why I put it on the agenda.
Dale, would you like to add anything?
Well, I agree with Steve that, you know, it's a program that's going to help people stay in their homes, and you know, the taxes will get paid. It's a deferred program, so when the home is sold or whatever, and down the road, the community gets, you know, still gets paid the tax. So, I mean, I think we ought to move forward on writing an ordinance to be part of in town.
Now, excuse me, does the state actually have an ordinance already in place? I mean, there must be, other towns must be running in the same
They're all
circumstances.
running into the same thing, so I'll pool the managers on the listserv to see if anybody's come up with anything, and then I'll send it, whatever we have, or if they don't have anything, I'll send the legislation off to Roger, and, or off to, Roger Terrio, and have him draft something for us.
Would think that the state would jump on that. If they're going to issue something like this, you'd think they'd issue some kind of legislation.
I would think so, too,
You'd
yeah.
think, but
It's the state.
they just give new laws and new procedures, and they don't give any meat to them,
So
sorry.
then, just to clarify, the way that it's actually written here is the way that it's going to go into law, because it's got all this cross out and add in, okay. And so then we should expect to see something similar to that
Yes.
when it comes forward as norms?
I'll get it, once it's all drafted, I'll make sure we have the original.
Any other comment? Okay, let's move on.
Item B, policy for disposition of town-owned real property.
This was something we brought before you several meetings ago. It was something that Mike and the Water Department, Ken Wells, looked at. Roger drafted this. I don't know if you've all had it. It's a policy, so you really don't need a first reading or any of that. You just need to agree that this is how you would like this to read in the process. And if you've all had an opportunity to read it or not, but.
Excuse me, is this pretty much the same writing? Just you had changed a couple of things from the last time. We actually had already looked at this one.
Yeah, you
correct?
had looked at this once, yep.
Was there any major changes, do you know of?
Nope.
Okay.
Any other questions or comment? Okay, move on.
Item C,
Do you want to vote on this or no?
Yes, I guess we do need to, I wasn't sure which order it was in, but yes, I guess we have to vote on it. Okay, I'll entertain a motion that we vote on the policy for disposition of town-owned real property.
I make the motion that we actually accept the policy as written.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
order passed 6-0.
The next one, I'll give just Ava.
Item C, recognize Downtown Achievement Award winners.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. As part of the downtown network communities throughout the state of Maine, every year they take nominations for the outstanding Maine downtown network community. And we submitted the town of Lisbon for a nomination, and we were awarded the Outstanding Maine Downtown Network Community, which is, there are 7 total communities within this group, and we got a very good review, and nominated and awarded, which is outstanding for Lisbon. It'll be this coming Friday, awards will be given on this particular aspect. Anybody that can attend, that would be great. Let Jody know, she'll be back tomorrow on that. We also submitted and this is an outstanding public official or employee award, and this goes for the whole Maine downtown program, not just for the network program. And Gina Mason was nominated, and Gina Mason was awarded the outstanding public official because it is that she gets it. She knows what she's trying to accomplish. So and she will get recognized in front of everybody, which is a truly outstanding award. Also, as part of this program, we submitted a nomination for the Outstanding Public and Private Partnership. And once again, we nominated Maurice Bono's Sausage Kitchen, and because we've had a great relationship in helping him move, and he also won the nomination for that. So Lisbon has received 3 awards out of the 4 that were possible at this convention, and it's really quite an honor, I think, for hard work that everybody who was part of the downtown group at revitalization has done. It's outstanding. So,
Good.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, awesome.
Thanks.
Item D, Town Manager's Report.
find it. Thank you. We received our MDOT Bridge Maintenance Division report. If anybody would like to see the photo, they did it in photographs with a whole list of things that we need to work on. Fisher Road, we talked about that bridge before, and Buttons is working on getting a cost estimate. He also received those, so we hopefully we'll have some money left over this year to take care of that issue. Also, Upland Road, I think I brought this to your attention last meeting. They're concerned about, the MDOT seems to think the cost of doing the Upland Road may exceed what we originally budgeted. The gentleman, Jim Ferguson, who is the oversight manager, project manager for that program, doesn't quite believe that. He feels that we'll come in on budget or under budget because there's a lot of hungry contractors out there who are willing to do that. We have the fire department has a 1996 Jeep that it will not pass inspection. They've patched it and fixed it. There's been a request from Buttons if he could purchase it for $500. I think the process is we really probably should post it internally to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity. It's junk. I don't really think anybody can fix it, but we'll give them the shot and see who wants to pay the highest. Dispatch, we are meeting on the 3rd of this month, this week. All the town managers and some of the public officials are going to be meeting here to talk about this letter we got from the Public Utilities Commission and them looking at consolidating all the dispatch services. I think we really need to, everybody was very concerned. They all got this letter. So we have some public officials attending as well, so if anybody here would like to attend and be part of that process and discussion, we're going to be looking at the study that David, Chief Brooks did, and try to come up with a solution that as a unified front.
Wednesday, what time?
Thursday at 3 o'clock.
This Thursday.
Oh, yeah, this is Tuesday, that's right, Thursday.
Where's it being held?
Here.
Right, yeah?
It'll probably be in this room here. So please attend if you can. It ought to be an interesting discussion. And that's all I have.
May I ask Steve something?
Yes.
Steve, maybe this is off subject a little bit, but I actually seen the Brownfields grants that actually were awarded through the different, and that was for the asbestos removal, I believe, right? That's what that
Yes.
program is for?
Yep.
Now, I know the school is actually running into another issue. Is that something that the
Yes.
Brownfield can be used for in the past? I know I've mentioned it multiple times, but
Yeah,
never really...
Kathy Mesmer called me today, and she had heard this rumor that we got free money, and I said, well, state pays and federal government, but I
Yeah.
put her in touch with Rosie, and because Rosie seems to have a knack to get these grants quite easily, so they're going to talk to each other tomorrow and figure out how they can make this work.
But maybe a possibility.
Yeah, I think it's a good possibility that we can do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So,
Great, because I know they've been running into that for years, the problem with the high school, so any help would,
yeah.
it's always been funded, but also all locally. So it'd be nice,
There's money out there from what I understand, and we've done the one, the VRAP and at the site of the old garage down on 196. We did the school.
At Campus Avenue, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
so there's a few things we've done, so.
Yep. It'd just be nice if that, I mean, it's amazing how close that town is, but yet how far apart it is sometimes when it
Yeah.
comes to communication, so,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Twyla?
Next item is under audience participation. Those in the audience who wish to address the council may come forward.
Hi, good evening. I got here a little late, so I didn't see I'm sorry, I'm Debbie Berry, Lisbon Falls, Maine. On item number 6A, specifically LD 1121, an act to protect elderly residents from losing their homes due to taxes of foreclosure. I didn't know the position of how the town's going to look at that.
The council has agreed to move forward, and we need to write an ordinance, and there hasn't been, the state issued it, so there has not been anything written, but the council wants me to draft an ordinance for this, and they'll bring it back.
I would urge not participating in this because it's going to create a vacuum that if in fact an elderly person is allowed to do this, and I support senior citizens, not a problem, but it has to do with revenue, that if there's, say, 5,000 people in town that are allowed to have a forbearance of their taxes until they sell their property, that there should be some kind of arrangement, like the children that are going to inherit the property pony up the difference, because that vacuum that's caused by those taxes not coming in, the other town people have to come up with that money. Salaries still have to be paid, everything still has to go on, so that revenue source has to come from somewhere. And as a taxpayer and a property owner, I know where it's coming from. So to adopt that without any type of discussion, or at least allowing people in town to know how this is going to impact each homeowner.
This is an ordinance, and the state law that has been drafted is very specific in who qualifies and who doesn't. Not every senior citizen qualifies. Plus, if the house is sold or ownership changes hands, the money automatically gets reimbursed to the town. So there's quite a few guidelines, and it will have to go before the public anyway. There'll have to be a first reading and discussion prior to this becoming enacted by the council. So there'll be a process in place for public hearing, and
But again, the people that are eligible to get this, let's say if there's 5,000 in a town, and you have that loss of revenue every year, and the person is still allowed to stay there, and the children that are going to be inheriting that property are allowed to do that as well, that at the time of the transfer of estate to the child, that the property may not necessarily be sold, and the taxes are still not paid, but somebody's got to pay those taxes. And I would urge not adopting this, not in the format, because it doesn't appear to be well thought out at all.
Can I add to that? I mean, one of the processes we have, and unfortunately, it's really hard to discuss a lot of the details, because a lot of details aren't put out front of us until it's written into an ordinance. But that's one of the advantages of writing an ordinance, is the idea of having a discussion and seeing the details of it, and be able to take the information that we have from the ordinance and be able to see how many houses that could be affected, and try to get some numbers on it and actually have some public input. But unfortunately, until we get to that point, I mean, just because you draft an ordinance doesn't mean you actually move forward with it. I mean, that's why we actually have the first and second and public hearings, to try to get that information, because it's, by reading the information we have, it's very difficult to know the details until it's written to almost a language that's more understandable, for me anyways, you know. It'd be really hard to make a decision, yes or no. So the decision we talked about tonight wasn't the idea of adopting it, it's more the idea of getting it in a form that we can discuss it.
Yeah, but the language from the state appears to be that certain individuals are going to be eligible for this, and it may only be a certain number, but in the meantime, the salaries still have to be paid, and everything else has to maintain a certain level of
Totally agree,
service.
yep.
So when this property is sold, and the money is then returned to the town, how are you reimbursing the taxpayers? The ones that ponied up the money during the time of the people living?
One of the things I think we have to understand too, and again, until we actually get it more detailed, is wondering what our liabilities are. I mean, if it's a state law that's written and we really, whether we have the opportunity to adopt it or not, or we're forced to, I mean, that's one of the things that, once it comes in ordinance form, we'll be able to understand a little bit better. We may not have an opportunity, if it's a state law, as a town, to say that we don't want to. You know what I mean? So again, those, I don't know, yeah.
Well, I do hope when they do write this ordinance that they clearly state that the money's taken from the other taxpayers, that it's reimbursed to the taxpayers that paid for the free gratis while the individual's property wasn't sold or the taxes weren't paid.
It's definitely a concern.
Whoever's inheriting the property should be concerned for paying those taxes in a timely fashion, real-time fashion, not wait 20, 30 years and then pay that and the interest back, because they'll never, let's say the real estate crashes, the house never retains its value. In the meantime, the taxpayers of the town have continued to support that, subsidize that, and yet there's no redress for the taxpayers.
I think part of what we're doing here is we're looking at what is allowed by the law, and then we're coming back and we're looking at what we'd like to have as an ordinance for the town. And as Fern said, we can't go above and beyond what the state allows, but we can go within our own guidelines. And this is only something for us to study. We haven't made anything.
It seems like they're opening the door, because today it's going to be elderly, tomorrow it'll be people with disabilities, the next day it'll be people with blue eyes, the next day it'll be people with blonde hair. It is people, if you own property, you pay taxes.
I agree with that, but
You know, I don't see the reason. If they want to waste their time up in Augusta, fine, but don't do it in this fashion.
we haven't decided on anything. I think we're just looking at it, and
All right, then I'll wait, but I personally say that this is not a good idea.
Okay.
Just the taxpayer's going to take the hit, and the money comes back, and the taxpayer, how would you reimburse taxpayers? It doesn't make sense to me.
I don't think any of us really know how it all works, and that's why we got this information tonight, is to understand it. And that's why we'll come forth and we will write an ordinance, and then we have the right to change that ordinance according to how we, as the council, feels it should apply to our town.
All right, thank you for your time.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who got audience participation?
Just something, if I could piggyback on that, is, do we know what the order, does it indicate in there what the order of reimbursement and precedence would be on federal money versus state money? The reason I ask is, and Lori may be able to speak to this, is with Medicaid estate recovery, if you have someone who receives Medicaid home care services or goes into a skilled facility under Medicaid dollars, once they've passed away or their home is sold, you're going to go into a state recovery. Federal government's going to have first dibs on any of that funds. Do we know where our state's going to fall? Because I doubt we're going to have precedence over the federal government. That'd be the only thing I would ask that you heed and look for in the language as to where we are going to fall. I'm all for supporting our elderly. We wouldn't have what we have now if it wasn't for them, but I'm concerned about where that money's going to come from and if it's even there, because with the estate recovery, the feds are going to get their money first, and there may not be any left over, and at almost $4,000 a month for a skilled facility,
Eats it up quick.
very quickly. So, I mean, if they transfer their estate 3 years before they go in and use those funds, that's one thing. It's going to go to a family member, but my concern is if they go into a facility or start accessing the Medicaid services before there is a transfer of that estate, all those dollars they're accessing is going to go into the estate recovery pot. You may not have a pot after you've sold and paid out for us to recoup our money. That would be where my concern would be. So I would just ask that you look for that language to see how we're protected in the event that something like that happens.
And I'm sure that's pretty much all listed on how the lien process is, because within the first year of that happening, I'm sure the lien starts taking legal effect, and whether or not who's, again,
Yeah,
where
but
that
whose
lies.
land's going to take precedence? I can
Exactly.
guarantee it's probably the federal
Maybe the
government.
state.
So
Yeah.
that would be
Or
my
assuming.
concern, is the estate recovery piece of it, and whether or not maybe there's a way we can work.
Luckily,
Try
that
to
every
solve
town and probably the state of Maine is looking at the same details, so hopefully they'll flow back to the top, if you can
Right.
say, and actually hopefully get some of the answers.
Right, that's the only thing I'm asking, is if you could just try to keep a watch for that to see where we would fall in that order, because at the bottom, there may not be anything.
I had somebody speak to me about this who is in a long-term care facility. They work in one, and they address this very issue. And once again, that is why we will look at it, and that's why we have the information here
Yep,
tonight.
well, that's all I'm asking, is just to
Sure.
keep a
Yep.
watch for it.
Yeah,
so we-
if you read the law, the senior property tax, there's a fund that is set up from state tax for our transfer tax. So we get reimbursed annually by the looks of how the law is written.
Or is there anything more you know about any of this?
I know that estate recovery will come first, and it's about $6,500 to $7,000 a month to live in a nursing facility. Estate recovery is taking effect for the nursing home level of care right now, but residential care, there isn't the asset level that they're looking at as of yet. But the state also needs money, so they'll start looking at the estates. And I do believe that the state will come first before there's any offset to any of the local communities.
I think that, once again, we have a lot of work to
Yes,
do before this
absolutely.
becomes law in Lisbon, so we'll take all those factors into.
I would only add one other concern, as Steve said, there might be a fund that's set up here, but we've already seen through this budgeting process that we haven't gotten all the revenue that is supposed to be, sent back to us, whether it's the funding of the 55% of the school or any of the other revenues. So I wouldn't run to the bank on them saying, we're going to get this money back, because we're starting off the next fiscal year, July 1st, in a
IOUs,
huge deficit.
IOU.
Right. They run out at some point.
Any more question or comment? Could you come up to the...
Are there copies of this ordinance available for us to read now, a draft or anything?
I would say if you went to, we do have copies tonight, but I would say if you went to the the main state website, you would be able to get it off there also.
Okay, it would be good to review. A comment that I not intend to make, but the last meeting that was televised last Thursday, the town council meeting you could hear, and then evidently the microphones were turned off. The second part could not hear anything.
Yeah, we've already addressed it, and we're hoping we're correcting that tonight.
Okay, I had my volume turned up as high as it could go, and then when that ended and I changed to another channel.
Hopefully, we have the problem fixed. Anybody else with public comments? Okay, Twyla?
Next item is under appointments, Order 2010-101, Audit Committee member, 1 council member.
I don't see any information. Am I missing
Well,
it?
we have to, the town council needs to appoint 1 member. We usually have 2, and 1 is, you're on it, right, Fern?
Correct.
We need 1 more counselor to volunteer to serve on the audit committee. Plus, we need to have 1 because we're gearing up for that first week of the auditor coming in and just doing a preliminary. So it'd be nice to meet prior to that.
Yeah, and again, we had actually talked that about a while back, and I know Mike had actually mentioned that he was interested in being on that also. But again, I don't know if that's changed or not, so I'll let Gina continue on with
Well,
it.
here's a good time to nominate.
Yep, and I
Okay, I
was
nominate.
thinking that same thought, but
Is there anybody else that might be interested?
I can't.
Okay, so we nominate Mike?
I'm pretty sure, maybe I'm
Yeah, he
misspoken,
did, I
but
know he did mention it.
I think he mentioned it to me because we were talking about some of the items that we needed to address from last year.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion that we nominate a member of this council.
I will make the motion, we nominate Mike Bowie for the other audit committee since he's not here tonight.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Order passed, 6-0.
Can I just add to that just for a moment?
Sure.
Steve, when are we actually, when is the,
Now you have a full committee. Jody will schedule a meeting.
prior to meeting with the auditor, right?
She's coming in, I think, end of June, so you'll have one prior to.
Okay. And one of the things I had recommended before from last year is to actually invite a person from the audit committee to sit in with that, because it's usually discussed every year, so.
Okay.
Okay, next.
Order 2010-102, Sealer of Weights and Measures.
This is an annual appointment. Just, this is a gentleman that always does it, and he has requested that he be reappointed.
I entertain a motion that we, I guess, reinstate Mr. Levesque. Anybody?
I make the motion that we reinstate Mr. Levesque for the weight and measures,
Seal of weight.
seals of weight and measures.
Second that?
All those in favor?
Order passed, 6-0. Next item, Order 2010-103, AvCog General Assembly, representatives for 2010-11, 2 members.
AvCog has sent us a notice just asking to us to update the representatives of AvCog General Assembly. Janet Henry was the elected official. I serve on the executive committee. Since Janet is no longer on the council, we'd like to have another elected official serve if they could.
Is there anybody that's interested?
When does that have to be?
They usually meet once a month, and sometimes it's not, if they don't have a lot of business like in the summer, they usually can postpone it. It usually starts at around 11:30. They provide generally lunch. It lasts about an hour, hour and a half the most. And it's just to have, sometimes it's good to have 2 people serving. Yeah.
I wouldn't be available, so.
I'll volunteer.
Mark will volunteer.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion that somebody nominate Mark.
I'd make the motion, we nominate Mark as a member.
I'll second it.
Okay,
Very good.
all those in favor?
Order passed,
Thank you, Mark.
6-0.
Thank you, Mark. Stuff to avoid.
Next item, Councilor Communications.
I have something. This past week, myself, Mike, Cody, and my husband, he just happened to go along, went to a FEMA meeting, and they're doing some flood redelineation stuff, and it was very interesting. The floodplain that we have now is basically, when you have a stream or a river, you have basically just it's a straight line on either side, 250 feet. With this new delineation, they're doing it by, they do it by airplane, and the mapping is all done according to what the airplane sees with topo maps. It makes topo maps, basically. So it's going to change a lot of the floodplain. That's something that they'll be working on into the fall. But for some people, it will be helpful. Folks that might own land that's in a floodplain, but it really has never flooded, that type of thing. So very interesting. I have a really small map here and some of the information that they discussed, but Lisbon happened to be the example that they used on the overhead, and it was a section of Ferry Road, and it was interesting to see what the floodplain is now and what it will be. So it should be helpful in some instances for some pieces of property for and against. So that was an interesting process, and we will have it by early fall. Anybody else? Councilor Communications? Okay,
Where's Dale?
sorry.
Well, I just want to congratulate the Revitalization Committee and
Thank
Gina
you.
for the awards. I think that's wonderful, that the hard work is proven itself out. And the other thing, I want to remind the public that we have a primary election on Tuesday, and I believe you can still request an absentee ballot if you want to vote that way, by requesting it from Twyla. Makes it convenient to vote at home, so just want to remind people that get out and do your civil duty and try to make a difference. There's a lot of bond issues. We got that LD 1495, which is going to impact a lot of people. That I'm hoping people get out and pay attention to what's going on there in this election cycle. So that's what I got to say.
I just want to follow up on that also by reminding people that even if you're an independent, you can still vote in this. It's not just a primary election. There's other stuff
Right.
on the ballot too. So even if you're not in a party, come out and vote too.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
And the other thing, just to add to that, is a school vote that's going to be coming up
Yes.
this Tuesday also. So if you have an opinion about the school happenings, please come out and voice your opinion.
Anybody else? Okay.
Just remind public about do a workshop on next Tuesday.
Yes, next Tuesday, we'll be having our budget workshop. We'll be voting on the municipal budget
On the 15th.
on the 15th. So just so others know, that is a final time to look at the budget. We'll be discussing it further, and then we'll make our vote on the 15th. Anybody else like to add anything? Okay, Twyla?
Since there's no executive session, the next order is to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 6-0.
We'll be going into a workshop with the water department, and I see one member here.
The only reason I found out is because I read the
Okay.
schedule with the water department.
We did at the meeting that everybody was here at. Bill was here.
Bill's on vacation.
Oh,
I'm here.
You're here?
You're the man.
You're the man.
It was posted.
No decisions made.
Okay.
So you're
we-
through for this,
Will we
right?
have a meeting, or what do you think we should do?
Yeah, you should have a workshop, because this is something that needs to be really discussed.
Route 9.
The Route 9, this is about the Route 9 and Mr. Upham and Upland Road, and,
Okay.
because we need to act on this.
There we do.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll come back and have our workshop with the water department. And thank you.
We were going to look at providing water services and correcting some of the well contamination issues to Mr. Upham. He has 2 properties. I gave 2 counselors, and you should have one to take. Did you bring with you the cost estimates we put together for?
Yeah, I didn't bring it with.
Okay, here. You can have, I have an extra one. And Ryan Layton, our engineer, got some prices, and basically to drill new wells, it would cost us approximately $4,200. If we did a treatment process on the existing wells, and something it's called reverse osmosis, it would cost $6,000 to get the setup put in place, and then $300 annually to maintain it. The other option we looked at, and we got a price from Longchamps, was to install an 8-inch main, which is what we've been using up through all the new work, which was a cost of about $80 a foot, or approximately $100,000. Or to install a 2-inch main, if we did the work ourselves and installed that pipe, it would cost anywhere between $15,000 and $30,000, roughly, but.
Still gonna have a pressure problem.
But we're still, with all these options except the reverse osmosis and the treatment, new well being drilled, you're going to have an issue with pressure.
Now, the 8-inch mine, that wasn't a quote from Longchamps, that was just based on the rates that we're paying right now, right?
Yes, that was the numbers based on Tim Septal's average of what we're paying for installation,
Right.
pipe.
So I just wanted to clarify that point, it wasn't an actual quote. I think what the water department is looking at is guidance from the council.
Ryan, do you want to make your recommendation based on what you've had discussions? What would be the best?
The problem, I mean, it's so hard right now to make a recommendation because we don't know for sure what the water department's going to do. I know everybody wants to see a tank installed there. What's the likelihood of that happening anytime in the next 2 years, 2 to 5 years, for that matter? There is the possibility that there'll be funding left over in the current bond to possibly put in a municipal booster station. But that's an unknown too, because we don't know to what extent we're going to be servicing and how much that's going to cost, land, everything else. So there's still too many options in the air right now. And obviously right now a well is the cheapest thing to do, but then you get into what liability issues do we have. You could drill a new well and install a treatment system, and then, DOT originally threw out the number of 20 years of maintenance. And I don't know if that's a legal thing or if that was a scare tactic or what it was, but, so if you're talking 20 years and another $300 a year, then you got electrical costs for the equipment as well as footprint. But basically the reverse osmosis system, I guess, is a couple tanks that they have to install in the person's house. And it's a treatment system.
Will I take the chlorides on?
Yes.
But it is a high-maintenance piece of equipment.
That's what I was.
And it has to have a system to dump to because it automatically dumps, it recycles itself every so often. So it's not just something you could put in and forget about.
And the question that comes in is, is that something that you dump to the septic system, or is that something you have to install another gray water system for? Is it are you gonna have a drain?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you that either.
Culligan gave us the estimate for the whole house installation, basically. There's various ranges based on usage, because it's size based on the usage, but for, kicking around numbers, we're looking at $6,000 up front, and then $300 a year plus electrical costs.
Right now I am dumping water softener in footing drains, dump into that field out there.
So if we dug him a well, and actually are we digging 2 wells? Is that how it's working? Because he has 2 properties, correct?
There's 2 individual, just the fact that he owns both of them is great, we don't have to deal with one person.
Right.
You have 2 wells, yeah, but you've still got 5 more. We got 5 wells total right now we have to deal with.
That are further up.
5, including his, so there's 3 more.
Now, just to refresh, what we did with Mr. Upham, we asked if he would like to be tied in to the water main on Gould Road, but it would be, I think it was roughly 1,500 feet of a private line, which he would own, and he made a comment that he really didn't want to do that, because it would be his problem. And so the next best solution, in my opinion, is to dig him a well. But your chances for that, I don't know. I know he's got the property for it in your back, right? But I don't know how far you'd have to go down. Water quality is another issue.
That was one of the questions I have. I mean, from the wells, because evidently what they're looking at is, and again, I know over the state of Maine, it's a question of, what got contaminated first and what didn't, but is there some type of rhythm to how close the well is to the road, to if it's contaminated or not, or, I mean, is there a certain distance, is there any guidance as far as, if you get 200 feet from the road, that odds are that would be less likely to be contaminated if it was being contaminated by the road salt, or?
The state told me 500 feet. That doesn't seem reasonable. One of my wells right now is probably 60 feet. The other one is 100. There is a marked difference between one at 60 and the one at 40. The one at 40 being better than the one not by 40, I mean 140 feet more.
Yeah.
So it's not an engineering analysis, but it does give you some reasoning that...
The farther you get away, the better you are, yeah.
But you don't have to go 500 feet, that's what like me.
Now, on your,
That was what they originally said when they were talking, because I remember the first meeting we had.
Yeah.
They're talking about servicing some, and then, I mean, they made it sound like they wanted to go 700 feet.
Yeah.
You get plenty of property, so we'll just stick it.
But then you have that,
You're digging a 700-foot trench anyway.
exactly, because now,
You
how...
gotta get a drill rig down there.
Yeah, now how far back in your property would you safely be able to drive on firm ground to be able to, I mean, if you went back, say, 250 feet, is there a location that you think that would be, I mean, you don't want to get it,
200 feet wouldn't be good. Back of my lawn is probably 250 feet.
and then you still got to run a pipe, like he's mentioning, I mean, you actually still have a personal pipe that runs back 200 feet back to your home, which isn't a drastic, but yet, it's still a distance.
I don't know how far we have to be away from septics.
100 feet.
100 feet.
100 feet.
I know when we were talking about wellhead protection for the Dragon Pit, one evening Paul mentioned that days of travel, certain contaminants that get into the ground, there are certain types that have different days of travel, and I would assume it would be something along the same lines, wouldn't you? I mean, it seems like your well that's further away is a little better, so maybe that's something that Paul could help us with at a later time.
We got wells, I mean, there's wells that are going to be serviced with water that aren't contaminated, so whether or not they hook up or not is their own, I guess, prerogative at this point, that are even closer to the road than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No
They
rhyme or
weren't
reason.
affected then.
Fine. I mean, there is no rhyme or reason. It's a lot,
Roger's got one.
it's a lot to do with the geology of, I mean, what I would guess, and I'm definitely guessing at this point.
Mr. Upham, how deep are your wells, Mr. Upham?
220 feet,
Both of them?
both.
So there also be different aquifers too?
Right, what type
That
of,
could affect it,
right.
so the deeper they go, the higher they go.
My well's 355 feet, but it's only about less than probably 60 feet from the road, and my water's
So
fine.
yours going
Higher.
that way, whichever way, that north, I guess, or would you be on the left or the right? I'm not sure.
I'd be on the opposite side of the road from Mr. Upham.
Uphill.
Probably, it's.
Yeah, he's
this way,
more-
too.
Right.
That's uphill.
Mr. Upham's tends to be where the water would run, I'm assuming, and Rogers tends to be up where water, but as he said, it's probably a lot
Salt that comes
deeper.
off the road is going to run.
Correct,
Water is in.
From my place, everything
Right.
runs down
yeah.
on the top.
Well, it's still going to leach into the ground. The salt contents is
Add
leaching
something
into
to
it.
it.
Sure.
Yeah, but I've had one of the wells, the one that's most contaminated, I've had a seal put around where the casing meets the rock.
Well,
And
this is, I'm talking still down below. I mean,
Yeah.
the water's going to percolate into the ground. It's-
whether it gets into the land or
Right.
not.
There's got to be some faults in there to make the salt get in there.
They did, the state did test my well twice, and once in July and then again in March, and it was the same. They didn't test one at the farmhouse.
I have made a recommendation for or recommendation, I should say, for our next meeting to talk about standpipe on Gould Road, to get the engineers involved, to start doing some calculations and figure out what we're going to need property-wise and construction of a standpipe. So
Yeah.
we're going to bring that up at the next meeting.
The meeting that I was at with the engineer was going over it was, you know, they didn't go off the size of the property, but the price of what we would need to be compatible all depends if we got rid of one of the tanks or both the tanks that we are using at the time were pretty substantial numbers even on the low side.
Well,
Yeah.
the price that we're quoted is just the price for one tank. That doesn't doing away with either tank.
Exactly, yeah.
Just the price to build a one tank.
Yeah, there was some pretty big numbers, yeah.
Our hope is that we could decommission one of the others for a cost savings instead of
Right,
doing
yeah.
maintenance, continue maintenance on those. We could
Yeah.
just transfer it to the other one and close up that one or both or whatever we have to, whatever we can get away with.
I guess, I mean, to move forward with it, then mainly what we're doing is trying to actually help you out, Mr. Upland, from what we've been talking about in the past. And I guess from a counselor, the only thing that seems reasonable for me, and again, this is just an open workshop, is the idea of going back in your property to find out a reasonable spot that wouldn't be too far back, to try to find a happy medium and to possibly put a well in and have it tested before you do all the work to try to get it to your house. The downfall would be is if we went back as far as we felt reasonable and found out the water didn't test out properly, then hopefully going into this, you would actually be open to the possibility at that point that we would have to somehow tie into the water system, because I don't think drilling multiple wells, if we go back to the best possible location, would be reasonable at that point. To me, the $4,200 to actually move this forward and to find out if this is going to work, and hopefully, you know, at 300 feet, we get more water than you ever seen and clear as can be, I mean, and then you know, connect it to your house and everything would be good. But if it comes to the point where we drill it, then it doesn't test to be any better than what the water is closer to the road, at that point in time, I think the discussion needs to be moved more towards the idea of, you know, long-term with some type of water line. I just don't think that you could possibly, you know, start drilling multiple wells and hoping that, I mean, we find a lucky spot. I mean, I don't know. To me, I agree with the idea, the farther you get away from the road, so if we can get back, say, 200 to 225 feet or 250 proper distance away from your septic and drill a well and hope that all goes well. I myself as a council would feel that'd be the best way to move forward with it. But, you know, I think if that does fail at that one location, I think at that point in time, we need to really invest in $5,000 to try to make a situation better at this point. I don't think it's a drastic scenario, but to start investing $10,000 or $15,000 without some type of outcome that's going to be positive for everybody, it may be a concern. But I don't even know at this point in time, Steve, I know it funding-wise,
That was my question I just wrote down. Where's this funding going to come from?
the $5,000 that we would actually have to get from. And the other concern I also have is, you know, how do we move forward with other wells from this? I mean, unfortunately, the state actually, they tend to send us in a direction without no funding. It's kind of like what we see with the schools every year. But I think that'd be another discussion that we're going to need to have, and I'm not sure where that, I guess we'd have to point towards you, Steve, to see if there's
Legal counsel is talking to some people up in Augusta, and trying to get some answers from somebody up there above and beyond the commissioner, who doesn't give us any answers, and legal counsel who just keeps putting us off. So he's going a different route. We've talked about filing an injunction against the state, but he's before we go down that route and spend money on legal counsel for what it might require, we've kind of treading lightly. The other thing, we got notified on May 19th, Ryan, that we had 2 more sites on Ridge Road, 272 and 260. Do we have another 2?
5 total.
There's 5 more total. Where are they? Farther up?
It's 2 at Mr. Upham's,
Yeah.
Mr. Carville, and then,
Are they farther up?
there's 272 and 260.
Yeah.
both dug wells, Pillsbury and Cates.
Both dug wells and not artesian drilled wells, yeah. So they're fairly at water table in a sense, right?
Shallow wells.
Yeah.
Those are,
Just to throw it out, I mean, this is just a rosy picture. If you should drill the first well, get 10 or 15 gallons, and then I would entertain putting 2 pumps in and supplying both houses from the one well if it's adequate. So, going ahead with one sounds like a good idea.
Is there any other funding?
Well,
Yeah.
you're obligated to do something.
Yeah.
And you'll have to find the money.
Yeah.
well, I agree with Fern. I think, personally, what I would do is I would drill one well, and see what you get for results.
Right.
That type of money. And if we get fortunate enough that it's not contaminated and got plenty of water volume, then we really win, and he gets water. So, I mean, I think we should move forward. Personally, I'm ready to vote to move forward when we get to that point on drilling first well to see what we come up with the results.
Now, on the 4,200, is that just drilling, is that drilling, well pump? I mean, usually when I get a quote, it's basically everything to plumbing to the house, so, I mean, is that just a drill and?
When I talked to them, the impression I got, and I'd have to read the fine print to be sure, but when I talked to Bisson's, they were gonna provide the well and the hookup as part of that price. They
So-
generally get $4,000 or $4,200 in this area for a well, but because we're talking about potentially doing 5, they were gonna do all of them at $4,200 apiece.
So that's potentially hooked up to his house from that, if it's not unreasonable,
We
yeah.
didn't discuss really, it
Yeah.
would be in 700 feet away, or
Yeah.
200 feet away,
Yeah.
500 feet away. So, I mean, that's something I need to confirm before we move forward, and then that's the other discussion. Are we gonna have to put this out to bid, or can I just?
I think we absolutely should put it out to bid.
Yep.
That's my opinion.
Also, if we're gonna push water 700 feet, we're gonna need a little different well than our conventional well pump too, aren't we?
But the way he's talking is 250, the other house would be, yeah.
Depends on what kind of elevation change is gonna be there.
Well, you got the
Downhill.
depth of the well plus the elevation, you gotta push it up to the house.
Downhill
So-
that way.
I don't know that without knowing where we're.
So the well company can figure all that out, size the pumps.
Just from start.
I'm assuming he's gonna have to have at least a 2-horse pump to push water that far.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
we
those
have
things
that.
are
Yeah,
expensive.
we have that in ours.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, where does the end of our liability lie? I mean, and I want Mr. Upham to have water, but we have 3 others that have problems also. And what if we continue to have problems with the water? How many wells do we have to drill? How many water lines do we have to put in? That's my question.
We also have, how many that can be hooked up to the water main that's going up Route 9 that are contaminated? We also
That are
have
contaminated?
those that have to be hooked up too, and that's another thing,
Right.
is somebody's gonna have to cover the cost of that.
7 that are gonna be hooked up.
That's lower, that's down further,
Yeah, those are
Yeah.
serviced by the water.
like by Walter Morse in that area.
They'll also have to have some type of, probably an inside booster pump to give them adequate water pressure in the house until a standpipe can be constructed. So, could be 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road, they'll have to operate with that little booster pump.
At one point in time, we had spoke to possibly the same pump system they're using for their well would be adequate. I mean, has that been talked about anymore, since they're already using wells already, that they have a well pump?
It depends if it's a submersible or
Or in-basement pump?
in a basement pump.
So who can assess that? Is that something Ryan can assess, or the water department, or?
That's kind of not our responsibility.
Oh, I realize that, but somebody can go in there and say, you have such and such a pump, can,
It's the town's responsibility, so I would put
Yeah.
Ryan in charge of it.
I've got Longchamps putting together a price right now to hook up.
Everybody.
I mean, if we can use existing equipment, that's a savings.
Not gonna really know for sure until it's hooked up.
But they can see what they have, and, I mean,
We
it's
can discuss having.
feasible, it's, okay, anybody else, any other
I have a
questions?
dumb question. So
On
if
the
we,
audience, Gina.
Yeah, let's see that.
if we move forward with drilling a well, just one, we'll call it our test well, I mean, over what period of time would we wait to find out if it becomes contaminated? I mean, do we wait one winter? Do we wait a couple of winters? You know, it's not like you're going to drill down and it's going to be contaminated with the chlorine and the salt and everything else like instantly. So,
there's still too many.
Unanswered
We
question.
could have, I'd love to have some direction, just. I don't know. And that's what I say, I mean, with
Yeah.
DOT, I mean, at what point, if 5 years down the road, it becomes contaminated, are we now responsible for putting in the $6,000 treatment system?
that's kind of my question.
One of the things that Attorney Terrio and I have talked about doing is trying to bring on a consultant, a geological consultant, who, he's worked with somebody on these issues. He's got a case he's doing in West Bath currently with salt contamination, just a different source, and he's going to speak to him to see what we would need to do to get him on board, to give us better advice on what the geology is in that region, and so I'll speak to him again tomorrow to see if he's done that. The other thing that I am looking at is a possible emergency funding. The CDBG office has an emergency funding, maximum is $100,000, based on, it has to do with health and welfare and this certainly does qualify for that.
Yeah.
So we can get that started and try to move forward, and once we have some better estimates, I think we ought to get some fairly accurate numbers, my own opinion, on what it would cost to run a pipe up to Mr. Upham's house based on either a 2-inch line, and we could run it on the side of the ditch. I know we can't do it on the, where the road's going in, but we can certainly explore the idea of doing it on the outside of the ditching and having an easement and running a line, so the water department ends up inheriting that line, and it's not on Mr. Upham's property running through the middle of the field or whatever was planned.
I just want to point out that if we put a pipe up there, there will still be no water.
Yeah.
With the existing
Right,
system
the
we
pump.
have, we would have to put in a booster pump somewhere.
And what is the cost of that? I haven't heard that thrown out yet.
That depends. It's something an engineer's going to have to do, but it's going to have to be, you know, my calculations is for a motor size is a 483 phase power.
We, in that meeting that we were at that night, they were talking to, and this was to make that system work without a pipe. You know, it was in the $250,000 range for to get the proper pressure up around there, to actually, with the system, because when there's more than just pumping the pressure up. At the other end of the system, you need to actually be able to drop the pressure back down, so.
We got to have a backflow regulator at the other end.
Exactly, so.
Minimize the pressure so you don't pressurize the whole system with one pump.
And the downfall of that is a continuously charge for electricity on both ends and monitoring, and there's a lot more to it than just putting a pump in by the sounds of things, from what I took from it, so.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
But with no volume tank for that pump, it would basically be online all the time.
Exactly.
Constantly.
Yes.
Okay, because this is a workshop, we're just going to keep our comments brief, but could you come to the microphone, please, anybody that has a comment?
I just want to ask a question. With the concern of all the money and the big cost of everything, what about that Warren's property that they sold a while back? It's at the top of the hill. Town can acquire people's property, but I mean, by asking, would you willing to sell it back? Because for $1 million, I'm sure we could put a pipe up there and run it downhill with no electricity bills and nothing like that. Because it's been proven there's a lot of water up there on that property. Some lake or something underneath there.
Where are we talking?
The town just let it go.
Well, at the very top of the hill, kind of at the height of the land, basically, it's the old Warren farm is what it was.
There was a property that they owned for years.
I think that
Right
somebody,
behind my house.
They actually, I was kind of in discussion one night, and they were mentioning that the property was just to actually put a tank on, not so much the idea of pump from. I mean, I'm not sure, I mean, there was no discussion that night about any water source there.
I was told
Yeah.
that there was some type of water source there.
Yeah.
They're
This,
not gonna, they
Would
can't
someone
do
tell-
that now without testing that water. I mean, they just put $3 million filter plant at Moody Road to handle arsenic levels.
Yeah.
I mean, and that plant is sized to provide the water through the town. I mean, that, from what I understand, it's the Route 9, the height of the land there, that was the best place for a, because it's the highest point.
for a tank, right, for
For a tank.
yeah, for a tank.
Holding.
Pump all the way uphill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pump it from Moody to
Yep.
there.
Which you can, that pump station can do that.
Right.
We could
Yeah.
actually put, I think, 2 or 3 more wells do that filter plant.
Right.
Before it maxes out. It was built.
It was built pretty good. It was,
Growing size tank.
I think the cost factor is probably one of the biggest things as far as pumping it up there. We'd be right back to what kind of pump, how far does it
Well,
pump,
the pump that we have now can't pump it up, probably
It can.
pump it up that far.
just to fill the tank.
It's essentially pumping to the Memorial Street state, I mean, they're basically the same height.
Really?
The tank they were looking to install on Upland Road, it wouldn't be on Route 9, it would be a lot higher on Route 9, but from what I gather, from all the discussions that have gone on and reading the studies that have been done, it's the Memorial Street tank overflow at this point is essentially the same height as if they put the similar sized tank on Upland Road.
yep, he would actually, the engineer was saying that night that you could actually partially bury the tank on Upland Road, like 10 or 12 feet above the ground level on Upland Road is this height as both the other tanks. Because the way those other tanks are engineered, we're not using 100% of both those tanks because they're offset. One only fills 3/4 full, the other one's full. And there's a lot of engineering there, I think, so. But to actually get good pressure there is probably $1 million, $1.5 million away to get that after we get the land,
Right.
And the greater the pressure we have, the better pressure I'll have at my house too.
That's it.
Yeah. I think that the problem we have is something that needs to be fixed soon, and that is a great idea, and I think the town's always had that idea, and so has the water department, but I think Mr. Upham, his problem needs to be addressed much sooner than that could ever happen, and that would be at least a couple-year project, I would assume. Am I wrong?
It's not just him, I mean, you still have
We have the three other houses.
Right, but you still have to take care of those problems in the meantime, so, I mean, people need to have clean water, I guess.
And there's no way in the short term to run a water line all the way out to those other houses on the side of the
Right.
hill.
It would be nice if we could just lay it on the ground, but we could
can't.
lay it on the ground, but we still wouldn't get pressure up that far.
I'd like to have it up at the top too.
Are we going to continue to use this calcium on the roads that's causing this problem?
Well, sodium chloride, it's salt, yeah.
Are we going to continue to use it?
Well, if people want their roads de-iced, that's what it requires.
Can we do it?
If you want to make it an environmentally safe area and not use it and just use sand, then we can do that too. That's actually, it's a state road, so we'd have to go through the state, because we do it under contract.
Hard enough to get that hill the way it is.
But the problem that a lot of discussions we have is, I mean, in the state of Maine, it's not uncommon to use salt and sand. So, I mean, if the downfall is this discussion is going to go on for years, and it's been going on for years before, and eventually it's going to get to the point where the town of Lisbon sues the state to find out what their liability limits are. And then there's going to be some type of judgment that comes down and saying, this is what you are and this is what you are liable for. And until that happens, I mean, if you tested, you mean, the only reason Route 9's an issue is because the wells are tested. You mean, and there's probably, hundreds, tens of thousands of homes in the state of Maine that live on the side of roads that actually get salted every winter. So, I mean, it's not a unique problem to us. It's unique to us right now because we're actually having a road rebuilt, and it's been...
Well, the people in Sabattis are going to, have they started testing wells in Sabattis yet? I've already talked to the town manager, and it's going to become an issue. If they have the same issues, they got a lot more distance to cover pipe, and they actually have a water system that comes up to where the exit is. We've talked about that, so we've actually talked about jointly looking at this to address it as an emergency. If they start coming up with wells that are contaminated as well, we should be addressing that as, they should be addressing it as well. So, we're working on that.
Also like to bring up that no wells on Upland Road have been tested yet. So we might run into problems there too.
We're going to have a pipe there eventually, right? So.
Yeah, they're working pretty good, but I just we're still
Still open.
to more problems with contaminated wells, the possibility of it.
Yep.
But that would be a simple fix. I'd just tie them right in.
And it's amazing too, because when they did 125, the home that was staying at, the well is literally 20 feet off the road. It's been there since forever, and that tested fine, So, I mean, it isn't the idea that you're close to the road and salt, because 125's been salted for a long time.
Is the water department going to put drops at all on Upland Road, just in case we have
Yes.
to hook in? Okay. So
Every identified residential that has a house or a possibility is what I was told that we were putting a drop at,
Okay, good.
up to their property line.
Yeah.
And on Route 9 also.
Yeah, I knew we were doing that.
Can I make a recommendation? Just, I think what would be prudent is for us to start talking to a geologist who specializes in this stuff to kind of give us the lay of the land of what we have underneath the ground, and then come back to you on the 15th when you have a regular meeting with it, so you can make a decision to either drill and get Mr. Upham taken care of, and at least start that process then.
Could we, in the meantime, go through the bid process so we can get bids for actual numbers, what it would cost?
We can do that.
To actually go from a well in a good location to be hooked up to the house? Actual numbers, you know what I mean, so we know what we need for a pump, what we need for a piping, and, you know, turnkey type numbers. I mean, to me, that'd be ideal, because granted, I mean, everybody has an opportunity to get in, you know, multiple wells, but I think we need the best price.
Well, that's where we need to know too, I mean, a range for how far away, so we know how much,
Yeah.
Okay.
what size pump to supply.
Because this is a workshop and we can't take a binding vote, we just, I think a nod of the head, does everybody agree with that's what we should do as far as Ryan getting some bids, having the geologist come in? I agree
Some
with that.
advice.
I think that's the next step to go. I agree with that. Is there anybody that's opposed to it, or
Plus, you're going to be pursuing the
the state?
The state, yeah, the emergency grant, absolutely. We'll start that paperwork this week.
Now,
Is this something Mr. Upham will be satisfied with before we...
Mr. Upham, is that something that you would be satisfied with if Ryan was to start checking into all this with the bidding process as far as getting some prices, and Steve's working on the state portion of it and the geologist portion of it? Would that be something you'd be acceptable to? Okay.
And we'll bring it back on the 15th at our regular meeting and have the council vote.
Ken?
I'd just like to have Ryan, instead of just concentrate on Mr. Upham, to do all the other at the
Yes.
same time.
It'll be a bid for 5 wells, plus or minus.
Right, so Ryan could take them and show him the property, and
Yeah.
I think he'll just need guidance from somebody on how far back to dig the well.
yep.
Okay. All right.
What happens if we run out of property?
Well, we'll cross it,
The lot
but...
is too small, and the geologist says you need to dig 500 feet away from the road. They don't have 500 feet.
I think we have to cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, I think we'll just do the best you can, Ryan. We trust you, okay? Go for it.
Yeah.
You start looking at the reverse osmosis.
Yeah, I think then we need to go to the next step, but that's our recommendation. Any other comment from the council? Ryan, Steve,
Well,
Ken?
I'd just like to, state that the town is also liable for connecting, hooking the homes up on Route 9 or Upland Road if they have contaminated wells, so that's a cost that the town's also going to have to bear too.
That's already calculated into the documents that we did for the bond.
For both.
For Route 9.
For Route 9, I'm just saying.
Well, if it's,
Upland Road,
we'll have to
there
get an
might be
estimate of how
something.
many we'd have to do if we have in fact
Right,
contamination.
we won't know that until the water samples.
That's right.
Testing comes back, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to verify that point, that it is covered.
It is.
It is.
Okay, guess that's all. Thank you very much. We'll see you next Tuesday.